welcome back to the hashtag I've My Everywhere show. Got the honor and pleasure having Kevin from CDW joining us today. Kevin, thanks so much for joining.
Josh, my pleasure. Happy to be here.
Being at CDW, one of the largest power resellers in North America and perhaps the world. One of the things that I'm always excited hearing about is you weren't always at CDW, and I'd love to hear about your history. Share some trends that you're seeing in them. I know you're involved with IBM and directly, and I think people will be interested to hear what's going on from today and what you're seeing in the future. So maybe let's get started with your history. It'd be great to hear a little bit about that.
Sure. Depending on how far back in time we want to go, I can start all the way back in college. Started my college career fresh out of high school as a starry-eyed wannabe engineer and got into a good engineering college in my hometown, UW-Milwaukee, and spent 2 years nose to the grind before I successfully got myself out of college. And I did that by slacking off, enjoying freedom, discovering what beer tasted like, and having a lot of fun. So on behalf of the University of Wisconsin system, I had to take a little time away from the university system, and I went more to a blue-collar area, learned how to work on cars, got a few certifications, and decided working for a living isn't for me. I want to go back to college and get a real degree. So when I came back to college, I didn't necessarily want to go back to doing the same thing I was unsuccessful with, so I focused more a little bit on business, but I still enjoyed engineering. I like problem solving. I like going at things that I don't understand and figuring them out. So I still took some computer programming courses and learned some things. And at one point, right before I was about to declare a major, my advisor called me into her office and I sat down and she says, "All right, what are you going to do? What are you going to declare?" And I said, "Finance, that's for me. That's where I'm going." And she goes, "Really?" I'm like, "What?" She goes, and she pulls out her transcripts and she slides them in front of me and she has like things highlighted on them. And everywhere where I had a computer program course, some type of language or something related to computer, it was an A. And she goes, do you really want to ignore this fact that every time you've delved into anything computer related, you've aced it? And I'm like, "But I don't enjoy it." She goes, "But you're good at it." So long story short, basically finished with a double major minor, business and then computer science, and got myself into the computer field. First job out of college was with a big national insurance company. They're a very large IBM customer, have mainframe. So when you get hired there, no matter what area you get hired into, the first thing they do is put you into a multi-week mainframe programmers course. They focus on JCL and COBOL and some other things. So I spent like the first 4 weeks that I worked at this company just hating it, because I was like, I've spent my whole lifetime seeing the evolution of computers. I've seen Windows evolve. I saw Mac OS evolve, all this cool GUI interface stuff. And now you're going to throw me onto a mainframe? Why would I ever want to do this? And fast forward to today, they're still running those mainframes at that company. They're one of our customers. But I got out of that kind of educate track and they plopped me into the Unix area of the company. And I became one of their Unix administrators for HPUX. Right around 2000, I got an opportunity to go to a local manufacturing company and be an AIX administrator. And I had never touched it before. I was like, "Oh, how hard can it be? Unix is Unix. I've touched Linux. I've touched BSD. I've touched HPUX. I've touched Solaris. Throw it at me." So I get hired by this company, never had logged onto an AIX system. Day one, they sit me next to their I administrator.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. And the I administrator was everything that you, like in your mind, when you read Dilbert and you picture an I administrator, the pointy-haired guy sits back and makes fun of everybody else in the office. That was him. They had let go of their AIX administrator, so he was kind of doing double duty, administrating the I and then working on the AIX system. So he was my mentor for about 2 weeks as I came up to speed on learning AIX. And after 2 weeks, I was teaching him things about it because it was just another flavor of Unix to me. All I had to do was figure out the different commands and I was on my way. So as I spent my time with him, he started doing the opposite. He started teaching me. He taught me a lot about how it handles data, how it structures the IO load, how to do IPL load 400, how to back it up. So I learned as much from him as he did from me, and it was a lot of fun. And the two of us, after about a year, became that old married couple that you would walk in on bickering over dinner. We were always picking on each other. We were always throwing stones at each other. It was a lot of fun. So that was my condensed version of how I got power systems and both sides of it simultaneously at the same time.
Kevin, it sounds like when you were in your schooling days, you were focused on finance and engineering, and then you got into IT, just your luck. And here you are today. And what's interesting to me is that your schooling, it didn't sound like you had much experience with IBM I at all. It sounds like that was not part of the world that you were dealing with. Maybe you could share a little bit what you see in the marketplace from the schooling aspect of it, what's going on, and maybe why people don't even know about the platform.
Yeah. So I actually just had this conversation with some folks down at IBM when I was in Austin earlier this week. And unbeknownst to me, IBM actually does have a program where they partner with some schools and they provide them some hardware and they do some things. I wasn't aware of that. But back in the day when I was in school, almost all the systems were BSD. We had the very beginnings of the internet. I'm dating myself here because this is a long time ago.
There's a time before the internet?
Yeah, it was email was kind of a new concept. Moving data from over a wire was a new concept. So what we had exposure to in school was what the schools could afford or what was donated to the schools. And the engineering schools could get a discount from Sun because Sun wanted kids to come out of college and then use their systems, especially for engineering, to do CAD CAM drawings, modeling, 3D modeling. I was on one of the very first 3D modeling programs, which was pretty cool back in the day. You'd hit render and you'd leave on a Friday night and you come back Monday morning, you'd see it at like 98% finishing up.
The speeds have certainly changed a little bit since then.
Yeah, right. So fast forward to about 89, I was doing my master's degree. And as I was roaming the halls one night, I ran into one of my professors who was in the computer science school. And he goes, "Hey, Kevin, what are you up to? What are you doing back here? I thought you graduated." And I said, "I'm back at it. I want to finish my master's degree. I hate having free time at night. It's just a total waste. So why not do something where I can spend a lot of money?" And he looks at me and he goes, "Do you want to get some of that money back?" And I looked at him kind of cross-eyed and he goes, "Teach the Unix administration certification course here." It took me about 5 minutes to kind of ponder that over. And I said, "You know what? I might take you up on that."
Okay.
So the next semester, I started teaching the Unix certification course, and it was 2 courses per semester. And then if you completed them all from the university, you got this certification. And one of the things from the previous professor that I saw was the whole curriculum was about, can you write this script? Can you write that script? Can you comment this way? It was very what I would call college-based learning. It wasn't anything useful to you when you left college. And I took the whole curriculum apart and I said, I want to make this so that the kids who leave my class, who they get this certification, can leave and go to work for a company and have usable skills. When they get plopped into some place that has an IBM AIX system or a HPUX system, they're going to know what they need to do with it. They're going to know how to administer it. They're going to know what the businesses use it for, not just, can I write a shell script that does 50,000 loops and moves a couple files around. So I really stress the practical side of the administration course, not so much the technical side. And at the time, because I was working business partner, IBM used to pay business partners to put systems in their labs and maintain them. They had to be current hardware, and then they had to do so many demos to customers. So I use these systems all the time to do demos for customers. I'm like, why can't I use them for my class? Why can't my students be using these to do projects? So I had them VPN into the BPIC, set them all up with secure logins, and I would give them administration tasks. I would have them patch things. I would have them use a NIM server. I would show them how to do LPARs. I would have them.
And it's like real business. Like this is actually in like real time. People like actually are learning stuff. Like when they talk about like getting on the job, you actually learn things. Like this is not. Yeah. That's exactly what you were doing. That's amazing.
Yeah. So I placed quite a few students at real jobs at the end of this course because I would get companies around town who worked with the university trying to find students who are graduating. I probably had 10 of them that I helped getting placed. I knew some of the hiring managers and I would call them and I'd say, "This student, you want this one. They really get it. They're really good. They aced the course. They didn't really have any issues with it." And I stayed in contact with some of them for years. So it was as much of a learning experience for me as it was for them. Focus those students on something practical. I got them exposure to a real business system. I got them real business skills, and they were able to then use that to leverage to get a job. And then coming right out of college, they would hit the ground running. They wouldn't have to spend months, weeks ramping up and having to learn the job that they're to do.
So when you were in school, that it sounds like that it was not like that. It sounded like you were just doing like you're writing scripts and making things up and then hoping and praying that when you get to the real world that you'd actually be able to utilize one or two of these courses that you used. Do you think that today, way that we are teaching people, is that going the right direction, like the way you were teaching it, or are you thinking it's like still the old way of teaching?
Colleges in general are a different plane of reality because most of the professors, and I'm not saying all, and this is is a generalization, but there's a lot of exceptions to this, right? I have some friends who are professors who don't subscribe to this methodology at all. They're more practical in what they teach. But by and large, they pick up a book and they see a curriculum in the book and they teach out of the book. And what's cool nowadays is a cell phone. How do I develop for that? What are the tool sets I need for that? And that is cool, right? And you certainly could go to a startup and have some fun doing that. But by and large, 90 businesses are still running the same stuff that was keeping them running back in the 80s and 90s. And those are skills that are not taught. Those are skills that are kind of left by the wayside because they're not cool, they're not trendy, they're not sexy.
What would you suggest to help teach the new generation of IBMIers?
If I were teaching a 101 comp sci course, the first thing I would put up is a chart that said financial transactions. What percentage of financial transactions run on mainframe or secured closed system? And the answer to that is 99%. 99% of financial transactions still run on AIX, IBM I, or the mainframe. Yet we don't teach that in schools, by and large. What we teach them is how to make a cool app on a phone. But when you get to the real world, what really matters is how do you keep that financial system up and running? So as a core competency, I would start backwards. I would still start the beginning of the timeline of what's relevant to the industry and teach the kids forward. Have them do a JSON program once or twice. Have them write a simple COBOL program. Do a simple Fortran. Have them structure a database on an IBM. And then I would teach them, take this and say, how do you connect this to those back-end systems? That's where the power of the API comes in. So now the API goes from the phone to a middleware, from a middleware to the back-end and reverse. You'll have a little bit of everything all along the way. But if you could teach a student how to build a database on an AS400 and then how to do a data call on your phone back to that AS400 and update a record right then and there, I think you would be prepared for the world. If you could accomplish that as a senior project, you would be a master of your own destiny in the IT world.
I think you're probably right about that. I have a question for you is when we're talking about trends in the IBMI space, maybe you could share what you're seeing in the marketplace, maybe around MSPs or maybe hypercloud, what you're seeing.
Well, again, back to this, it's a skills problem. So as the administrators of get more and more gray in their beard, there's fewer and fewer of them, and they're hard to bring on the younger talent. You've got to move that platform to somewhere where you don't need that. You got to move that to a cloud platform. You got to move that to some type of shared environment, hosted, managed. So I think that's where the market's moving. But there's still a lot to be said for having control, having your arms around what you own for security, for latency, for data access, for backups. Cost being probably the very last element of that. But at the same time, as you get further and further away from the skill sets that support these, you've got to figure out how you can keep your business running without having to rely on an administrator who at any given day could be fed up and just say, that's it, I'm dipping into my 401k, I'm out of here.
Would you say that the technology is not doing well? It's just rather it's the people. It's the lack of skills, and teaching the next generation is probably going to be the most important point of the future of IBMI. And from your end, Kevin, how would you say we should be promoting the platform or schools being aware that they should be teaching this as it literally runs the world?
I told this to the folks at IBM. If I were to go back to college today, I would solicit IBM for one power server. That's all I needed. I would LPAR that power server into an AIX partition, a Red Hat partition, and a OS400 partition. And then I would then have them take an x86 and then have that talk to a cell phone. So if you could take that phone and do something, do some type of transaction, do a mock purchase of an item, I think that really would teach kids end to end how the world works.
I think you're probably right about that. I think there's also another part of it. I think that the beautiful thing about IBMI is that you are able to run all the other systems you just mentioned. And you're able to write in basically anything. You want open source, you want embedded SQL, you name it. You can do it. But I think that people are just scared of the platform. I think people don't even know what it is. And people are just not aware of just general information about it. And I think that to your point is if we could just get people, and including IBM, to IBM, to donate some of these things, things and teach people. Once people learn the platform, I have had enough conversations with enough people. Once they learn about the platform, they're like, oh, this is pretty sweet. Like that's easier than all the other systems I've been forced onto using for the past 20 years. Why didn't I know about this thing before?
Well, and it's exposure too. So when you get in your first job, you get these bake-offs that continuously happen between manufacturers. And the kids nowadays, IBM comes in to do their pitch and like, here comes the dinosaurs. Instead of, oh yeah, that's a technology I saw when I was in college. Let's hear what they have to say. They're still relevant. Instead, they're viewed as the dinosaurs. There was a long period of time where we couldn't even go into customers because they would say, oh, IBM, they're banned here. We can't bring them in. We had a bad taste in our mouth from some experience, whether it was a software audit or a system that failed that was mostly probably due to their own negligence. But I think that is turning back around again, but it would help if we had more exposure. That's what we need, is just the exposure.
The more exposure we have of the platform and having people aware of it, that alone would be such a big difference for people. Because to your point, people don't think of IBMI or IBM. It's the stigma. Like maybe we need to change the name of IBMI to Red Hat.
Yeah. To me, the scary thing about IBMI, the scariest part is when you go to the green screen. You go into that green screen and you're like, oh, where's my blinking cursor? What do you mean I got to use the F keys? What? I've never used the F. They've been here on my keyboard the whole time. Yeah. Why? Oh my God, those are used for something? I never knew they were. That's the eye-opening moment where you're like, we're not in Kansas anymore, Toto. You ever use flights.google.com? You know where that data comes from? Zorro. Zorro is the flight scheduling software that schedules all the airlines. Do you know what Zorro runs on? Mainframe.
Of course it does, right?
So flights.google.com, you're actively interacting with a mainframe. Is it painful? It's all been extracted from you, right? But that mainframe is probably the best, most optimized scheduling software there is in the world for doing exactly what it does. And if you re-platform that on Oracle, it would never run as well.
Yeah, sounds about right. Sounds like that. Like every other banking application. I'm not saying I go to casinos very often, but man, am I happy they're running on IBM.
Right? Yeah.
And let's talk a little bit about IBM Power, because that's really where you live. Where do you see the Power platform going in general?
So without sharing too much stuff that I can't share, I will say this. The ability to modernize how we access those legacy systems is going to make those legacy systems not legacy anymore. It's going to make them fully relevant. Because what's the inherent advantage of running one of these legacy systems? They're proprietary, they're a closed system, they're very secure, but they actually cost less. And I know that's kind of an oxymoron to think about, but and this is one of the ways that I've explained this to people. So year after year after year, we get a tick and a talk on x86 processors. They get a little bit faster, they get a little bit more features. There's a lot of legacy operating systems that all still need to run on them. When you go to these closed systems, that's not the case. The hardware is designed at the same time the software is. So when I make change to the operating system, I can go back to my hardware guys and say, hey, if you can update your firmware, I could make this set of library run a lot faster. Conversely, the guys who are designing the hardware can say, I'm putting in an extra place on the processor that I can speed up how I do mathematical calculations for this type of equation. You can now put that and optimize that into the operating system so that programs that access those libraries run faster. So you get a concert cooperation between the hardware guys and the software guys that evolve that, and everything just runs better. Right down to the security level, you can bake the security into the hardware, into the operating system at the same time. You don't get that advantage on x86 because the guys who are developing Linux aren't working at Intel. So number one, things happen a lot slower because there's so many different cooks in the kitchen. But some things just never happen. Innovation just never happens on that platform like it does on Power. And look no further than how many threads can you run on a Power processor versus an Intel processor? You still can only run 2. How many can we run on a Power processor now? We're up to 8. So to the operating system, that can look like 8 processors when really it's just 1 core. So even though you're running everything a single core, you've got 4 times the throughput than you would on a similar frequency Intel core.
No, it's really amazing. It's amazing what the Power platform is. And one of my favorite parts about the Power platform is the longevity of it. Do you have any good stories with being the hardware business, replacing something that's like 35 years old with like 3 inches of dust on it?
Yes, it's like the story of every day. You know, I'll tell you, one customer, a big retailer in my neck of the woods, many years ago had their entire data center ran on IBM Power. Everything was IBM Power. And their strategy was 100% IBM Power going forward. And they had thousands of LPARs across all these systems. And at one point, one of the executives said, we're spending too much money with IBM. We need to reduce costs. We need to take everything off of Power. We need to go open systems. We need to put this on Linux. We need to put this on Windows where it's cheaper. Okay. Fast forward 15 years. Number one, they still have a pretty decent sized Power footprint that's running in there. Stuff from 15 years ago that's legacy that's still running. Now they have tens of thousands of VMs, and the cost to run their business is tenfold what it was when they were running it on Power.
Tens of thousands?
Yes.
Tens of thousands. And how many IBM did they have before? How many power systems did they have?
Probably had a few hundred.
Not 10,000 though.
Oh. And here's the thing too. So now they're stuck in this point where who's one of the biggest checks that they write all their money to? Now it's Broadcom. And they're saying, I need to get off of Broadcom because I'm spending too much money on Broadcom. And they're going, maybe we should start looking at those power systems that we got off of years ago because they're a lot less expensive to run because there's not so many software layers on them, right? The way they were doing development is they had the x86 hardware, then they paid for a hardware virtualization layer, something that rhymes with Botanic. Then they paid for VMware to be put on top of that. Well, then they wanted to run OpenShift, so now they were running Red Hat on top of that. So how many different virtualization layers were they layering one on top of the other? And how many different vendors are they writing checks to? They were accomplishing the same thing previously before, writing one check to one company on a lot less hardware.
Unbelievable. I hear about that all the time. It is a very funny thing how people try to move away and then they realize, oh God, I should have just stayed. Dang it.
Yeah.
Like, how many extra zeros was my IT budget this year?
Well, yeah, and here's the funny thing too. The reason why we want to move off of AIX is because we have these 10 specialized administrators who have to know AIX, who are getting older, who run everything. Well, now go 15 years later, now I've got 50 administrators who have to know all these specialized different pieces and parts to this stack to be able to run it. So did they simplify their skill set? Did they really cut their costs? Did they really
No way.
make everything better? No. Well, I had a pilot tell me this once. He goes, you ever get on an old airplane? It's like, yeah. He goes, how do you feel about that? I'm like a little nervous. He goes, do you know how it got old? Because it's still flying. It's a good airplane. If it was a bad airplane, it would have crashed long ago. It didn't get old because it was a terrible airplane. That always made me feel better about flying on old airplanes.
No, I think a lot of it's the grass is greener on the other side. I don't think that people are realizing, hey, why not just stick around? One of the best lines I've ever heard was that a legacy system means it's a good system. Like that, from the fact that you have it, it's been working since the 80s. It's still working. Just keep it. Kevin, really appreciate your time. And I think this has been fun. The point of these things is just to show that there are people behind the scenes that know their stuff, and glad that Kevin had a chance to share some of his stories and his experience. And you know where to find me, you know where to find Kevin, and hopefully I can talk to all of you soon. Thanks so much.